Lady Isabel Linden had long since learned that invisibility was a virtue in the Linden household. It was quieter that way, safer, less likely to provoke a cruel word or the icy smile of her stepmother, Lady Ellerton. She stood now at the window of the morning room, watching grey light spill over the frost-rimmed lawn. Her hands were folded neatly, though the right one still bore a faint ink smudge last night. She'd copied Lady Felicia's invitations, under strict instruction that her handwriting not look so sad. "Do stand up straight, Isabel," came the familiar clipped tone from behind her. "You're already unfortunate in colour. There's no need to compound it with poor posture." Lady Ellerton swept in, all taffeta and disapproval. At her side flounced Felice, her daughter from a previous marriage, glowing with smug beauty and the knowledge that her coming season was already being whispered about among the Bath matrons. Felice flicked her fan open. "And really? That gown again, Isabel? It's practically parchment. Haven't we any rags more fashionable?" Isabel turned slowly. "This gown is clean, and I mended it yesterday." "Indeed," her stepmother sniffed, eyes sharp. "A seamstress's pride suits your position well." The sting did not register on her face. Isabel had learned not to show bruise, emotional or otherwise. "We must focus on Felice's portrait sitting today," Lady Ellerton continued, adjusting the fall of Felice's curls. "Apricot silk, I think, such a flattering colour for her complexion." Felice turned to her mother with mock confusion. "Didn't Isabel try apricot once? Looked like she'd been boiled." Laughter tinkled between them. Isabel turned back toward the window. The mist had lifted. Beneath it, the crocuses strained toward pale sun. She thought of her father then. He'd passed 3 years prior, long enough for his title to be legally transferred to some distant cousin in Derbyshire, and his wife to begin treating his only daughter more like a governess than a lady. He used to read poetry aloud in this very room, voice warm with fondness. He'd called her his bright-eyed bellflower. No one had called her anything sweet since. Felice interrupted her reverie with a sharp sigh. "Why must you stare out the window so dreamily? It's really unsettling." "I was only looking," Isabel murmured. "Well, don't. You look like a ghost waiting to be claimed." Before she could reply, the butler entered stiffly. "A caller, madam." Lady Ellerton frowned. "We are not receiving visitors until Felice's complexion improves," she insisted, he said, gaze flicking toward Isabel. "Said she'd speak with no one else. Her Grace, the Duchess of Corbridge." The effect was instantaneous. Felice dropped her fan. Lady Ellerton stood up so fast she nearly knocked over her teacup. "The Duchess?" Lady Ellerton echoed. "Are you certain?" The butler did not dignify that with a response. A moment later, the Duchess herself entered, clad in emerald silk, her white hair twisted into an imperial coil. She held a pearl-handled K-knot for need, Isabel suspected, but for effect. "My heavens," she said briskly, scanning the room. "What a dingy little hole of a salon." "Your Grace," Lady Ellerton trilled, bowing too deeply. "What an unexpected delight." "I'm here for Isabel," the Duchess interrupted. "Not for tea," Isabel blinked. "Me?" "Yes, my dear. I knew your mother before she married your father. The two of us once ran off to Edinburgh to avoid a terribly dull hunting party. It was glorious." Lady Ellerton was floundering. "Of course, Isabel is very grateful for your remembrance, but we've not prepared." "You've prepared nothing, clearly," said the Duchess, eyeing Isabel's plain frock. "Isabel, do you want to rot here another year while these two bleat about hem lengths and hair ribbons?" Isabel opened her mouth, then closed it. The Duchess raised an eyebrow. "Have you forgotten how to answer, or have they trained you out of it?" That jolted something in Isabel's spine. "I want to leave," Felice gasped. "Mother!" Lady Ellerton looked ready to faint. "But your Grace," Her place is here. She has responsibilities. To what? Scrubbing Felice's gloves? The Duchess turned her back on them both. Pack your things, Isabel. You're coming to London. A quiet breath escaped Isabel's chest. The world tipped slightly on its axis. She didn't trust it not yet, but she could taste it. Possibility. Isabel had never been inside a carriage so fine. The seats were deep plum velvet, tufted and polished, with golden trim on every handle. Even the footrest was softer than her bed back home. Your fingers are twitching, the Duchess noted from across the seat, her sharp gaze unwavering. I beg your pardon, you're bracing for something dreadful. The Duchess leaned back with a rustle of silk. Don't worry, I don't bite, I prod. Isabel folded her hands tightly in her lap. I don't know what I expected. Neither do I, most days, the older woman replied cheerfully. But you agreed to come, and I've brought you, and that's enough for now. London blurred past the windows, brick and stone, shop fronts and chimneys, bright carriages with laughing passengers. It didn't feel real. Perhaps it wasn't. When they reached the Duchess's townhouse on a quiet Mayfair street, a footman helped Isabel down. She staggered slightly on the step, but the Duchess caught her elbow. You'll grow into it, she said quietly. Into what? Being seen. The interior was warm and full of unfamiliar things. Paintings of women laughing, fresh-cut roses, ivory walls with delicate vines of gilt curling around the molding. It smelled of orange peel and polished wood. The housekeeper, Mrs. Hay, greeted them with a grin. New arrival, then? Yes, she eats, she reads, she breathes, the Duchess said. Let's begin there. Begin what? Isabel wanted to ask, but her voice caught. The next day began the transformation. 3 seamstresses were summoned. One clucked her tongue over Isabel's faded frock. Another pinched her cheek and muttered something about good bones. Bolts of apricot, rosewater, and dove-grey silks were unfurled across the floor. I can't possibly wear these, Isabel whispered. They'll all say I'm playing pretend. Let them, the Duchess replied. Pretending is how we become. She was measured, styled, and sent for posture exercises with a sprightly Frenchwoman named Colette, who made her walk with a book on her head and scolded her for slumping. The world will trample you unless you make it see you, mademoiselle. At the end of her first week, Isabel stood in front of a full-length mirror in a gown, the color of buttery, radiant yellow. The sleeves kissed her shoulders. The bodice was delicate but firm. The skirt shimmered when she breathed. She looked wrong. And not because she was ugly, no, something deeper. I look like someone else, she said to the mirror. The Duchess, seated behind her with a glass of cordial, tilted her head. No, you look like yourself, finally in focus. I still feel like I don't belong in the light. The Duchess rose. Your mother once told me that light has a nasty habit of ignoring quiet brilliance, so we must shine a bit louder. Isabel turned. But I haven't done anything to deserve this. Oh, my dear, the Duchess said, taking her hands. The very fact that you think you must earn being treated with care means you needed it far sooner. Isabel's throat tightened. And as for your stepmother, the older woman added with a wicked twinkle, you'll be quite relieved to hear that I told her, in no uncertain terms, that if she ever writes to me again, I shall personally report her treatment of you to Lady Moresby and the Bishop of Bath. Isabel gasped. You didn't. I did. It was the most fun I've had in weeks. A small smile curled at Isabel's lips before she could suppress it. There, a glimmer, the Duchess noticed. Now, that smile, let's make that your best accessory. For the first time in years, Isabel didn't want to fade into the wallpaper. For the first time, she wondered if there was something in her worth, unveiling, not building, not borrowing, but simply revealing. She didn't know who she was yet, but she suspected London would help her find out. The Duchess had a rule: no mirrors until the third fitting. "You don't study a sunrise while it's still dark," she declared, waving her hand as the seamstresses threaded ribbons and snipped silk. "Let the colors arrive first." Isabel stood still on the small pedestal in her underdress, while Madame Rivette draped layers of dusky rose fabric over her frame. "Lift your chin," the seamstress muttered, sticking a pin in her mouth. "You're not hiding from wolves anymore." "I wasn't aware I ever had," Isabel replied, arching a brow. "Then your stepmother must be a goat, still worse." The room chuckled. Even Isabel let out a soft laugh, though it vanished quickly. The Duchess, sitting with a teacup at the far end of the salon, lifted an approving eyebrow. "There she is, keep her." But despite the soft silks and sparkling combs and shoes that made no sound on marble floors, Isabel still felt like she'd merely stepped into someone else's costume. Surely someone would soon declare her an imposter and send her back to Devon with a thimble and scornful letter. Late one afternoon, the Duchess summoned her to the music room, not for a lesson, but for a civilized scolding. "You are doing marvelously, Isabel," she said, as Isabel sat opposite her, hands clasped in her lap. "But you are holding yourself like a girl preparing to be scolded." "Stop it." "I'm not sure how," Isabel admitted. "It's a difficult habit to break." "You weren't a habit, you were mishandled," the Duchess said flatly. "I know the difference." She rose, walked to a glass cabinet, and withdrew a small wooden box. "Let me show you something." Inside the box, nestled on velvet, was a dull brochure silver, now tarnished almost black. "Ugly, is it not?" the Duchess asked. Isabel blinked. "Well, yes," the Duchess smiled. "It's Georgian, silver with a center of jet, rather valuable when polished, but left unattended." She traced a finger across it. "It collects the world's dust and forgets what it is." Isabel studied the piece, her chest tightening. "Now, suppose someone wore it again, cleaned it, set it against silk instead of dustcloth." The Duchess snapped the lid shut. "It would not become new, it would become itself." She looked at Isabel gently. "You are not being changed, you are being revealed." "But what if no one likes what's revealed?" The Duchess leaned forward. "Then they may politely take themselves elsewhere. I'm not preparing you for fools, Isabel. I'm preparing you for yourself." That evening, when she was finally allowed to look into the long, mirrored panel in her room, Isabel hesitated. She stood before it in silence. A new gown, apricot silk, soft and fluid, trimmed with ivory lace. Her hair was curled and lifted off her neck with pearl pins, exposing the delicate lines of her collarbone. Her cheeks held color not from rouge, but from something startled and new. She looked like she belonged in the light. Her breath caught, not because she looked beautiful, though she did, in a gentle, wildflower kind of way, but because she recognized herself. That night, she wrote a short note and slipped it under the Duchess's door. "Thank you for reminding me that glass reflects more than appearances. I think I'm ready to step through the looking glass. Isabel." The next morning, the note came back with a new line scribbled beneath it in elegant hand. "Then let's see if society has the good taste to notice what's been under its nose." The days that followed were dizzying. There were calling cards to respond to, names to memorize, which forks to use, and how to descend a staircase. Like you mean to own it. The Duchess handled it all with crisp efficiency, schooling Isabel in social nuance between luncheons and fittings. But the real challenge lay ahead. Her debut. The Duchess was hosting the first formal ball of the season. Isabel would be presented as her ward. "You'll be on the Duchess's arm," Colette said as she adjusted the hem of her debut gown. "That is to say, you'll be the flame. Expect moths." "But I don't want moths," Isabel murmured. Colette grinned. Then smile coolly and step on their wings. On the night of the ball, Isabel descended the great staircase with trembling fingers, her palm lightly resting on the Duchess's. The ballroom below glittered with crystal chandeliers, a sweep of violins, and faces turned upward. She heard it, the hush, the shift in air. "Who is that? The girl with the Duchess shove, you seen her before?" "No, look at her gown." Isabel didn't hear the exact words, but the tone was unmistakable. Curiosity, admiration, perhaps even envy. And still, a part of her braced for ridicule. But it didn't come. Instead, an older woman in sapphires said, "You're the Linden girl, aren't you? Your mother was a delight. And now I see the resemblance." A gentleman bowed deeply. "May I have the honor of the next dance, Miss Linden?" "Another?" said a younger man in a maroon coat, clearly jostling for position. Before she could reply, a tall figure approached, solemn, dark-haired, square-shouldered. His voice cut neatly through the chatter. "She is already spoken for, gentlemen." Isabel turned. "Viscount James Mowbray," the Duchess said warmly, "my godson and your escort for the evening." James bowed. "Miss Linden," she curtsied, steadying herself. "My lord." His expression was unreadable. Not stiff, not cold, but studying, evaluating. The orchestra struck up a waltz. James offered his hand. "Shall we?" As she placed her gloved fingers in his, Isabel felt the room spine end, not from the music. He didn't look at her like the others did. Not dazzled, not hungry. He looked interested. But not in her gown. James Mowbray did not care for crowds. He preferred campaign tents to candlelight, horses to harpsichords, and direct speech to layered pleasantries. But as he guided Lady Isabel Linden onto the polished ballroom floor, he found himself oddly curious. She was quiet, composed, her posture perfect but not haughty, and when she looked up at him just once, to mark the start of the waltz, her eyes did not flutter flirtatiously like so many others. They searched. "First London season?" he asked as they turned in slow, precise circles. "Yes," Isabel replied, tone neutral. "I take it you've endured many." He gave a dry smile. "Too many. I'm a viscount. There's always someone eager to marry me, off preferably to a simpering heiress with opinions borrowed from her chaperone." She arched a brow. "A romantic, then?" "Tragically so." Isabel gave a short laugh, surprised at herself. She hadn't expected to enjoy this, James noticed. "You don't dance often, do you?" She hesitated. "Not like this." "Ah," he said, "you were raised in the country." "Yes, Devon. You must miss it." Another pause. "Not as much as I expected." James studied her carefully. He'd known plenty of beauty, some striking, some polished to within an inch of humanity. But this girl wasn't polished. She was unfolding, like a letter long unopened. They spun gently, her apricot skirts whispering against his boots, her gloved hand light in his. Around them, the ballroom blurred, fans fluttering, voices buzzing, the faint chime of glass. But in their circle, there was quiet. "Why don't you chatter like the others?" she asked suddenly. He blinked. "Should I? Everyone else does." James's smile tilted. "I suppose I prefer meaning to noise." "That's rare," she said softly. "You speak like someone unused to being asked questions," he observed. "I am. Why?" Isabel held his gaze. "Because I was always told my answers wouldn't matter." James didn't respond right away, but his hand, resting lightly at her waist, tightened just slightly. Not possessive, protective. "Who told you that?" he asked at last. "My stepmother," she said, voice low. "Often, clearly." James's jaw set. Well, she was wrong. Their turn ended too quickly. The music slowed. Their final spin brought them to the edge of the floor. James released her with a bow. "You dance well," he said. "You speak well," she replied, surprising herself again. He offered his arm to lead her back toward the refreshment table. But just then, a flock of brightly dressed girls swept between them, all flutter and perfume. By the time the path cleared, Isabel had vanished. From the edge of the ballroom, Isabel watched him. James Mowbray had been nothing like she expected. He hadn't fawned, he hadn't smirked, or sought to impress. He listened. And yet, she could feel his eyes on her just once when he thought she wasn't looking, not in the greedy way of some men, but as though memorizing something he couldn't name. Colette found her a moment later. "You disappeared after the dance." "I needed air," Isabel said, fanning herself lightly. Colette leaned in with a conspiratorial grin. "Half the room is asking about you. The other half is asking about Viscount Mowbray. You're already the season's favorite mystery." "I'd rather be invisible than interesting," Isabel muttered. "Oh no," Colette said. "You're not invisible anymore. You're satin, dear, and satin reflects everything." Later that night, as Isabel peeled off her gloves and stared at her reflection-rosy cheeks, lips still parted in thought, she realized she hadn't once feared ridicule during the dance. She hadn't felt smaller than the room. She'd felt seen, and it was both terrifying and thrilling. Elsewhere in the city, James sat in the Duchess's library, a book open in his lap, untouched. "Come to read or to glower?" the Duchess asked from her chair by the fire. "I met her," he said without preamble. "Lady Isabel." "Ah," the Duchess sipped her port. "And? She's not what I expected. Few worthwhile people are. She's quiet." "Good. You could use some quiet." "She's also perceptive." She asked why I don't chatter like the rest. The Duchess's brow lifted. "Did you answer?" "I said I preferred meaning to noise." "And?" James closed the book. She agreed. The Duchess chuckled. "Well, well, perhaps your mother was wrong. You can make polite conversation." He smiled faintly. "It wasn't polite. It was real." He looked toward the fire. "She's been mistreated, it's obvious, but she doesn't carry it like baggage. She carries it like armor." The Duchess nodded slowly. "Then perhaps you should treat her like a knight, not a damsel." James looked at her. "I don't intend to save her," he said, "but I would like to know her." "Then see if she'll let you." Lady Isabel sat in the corner of the Brambleton Music Hall, a place neither shadowed nor too visible, exactly where she liked to be. The townhouse drawing room was crowded with ambitious mothers, giggling daughters, and overfed bachelors pretending to appreciate Mozart. Conversation buzzed more than the strings did. Isabel's fan lay idle in her lap. She listened to the quartet, but watched the audience, studying how many eyes scanned the room, not the stage. It was a performance of society, not music. "I suspected you'd hide here," came a low voice behind her. She turned, surprised. "Lord Mowbray." "James, please," he said, settling into the empty chair beside her without waiting for invitation. "You're not surprised to see me." "I am," she replied. "You hardly seem the sort to suffer a musicale." "I'm here under duress. The Duchess insisted I escort her goddaughter." "Again, you make it sound like conscription." His mouth twitched. "There are worse duties, but tell me something." She tilted her head. "Why do you sit alone when you're clearly the most intriguing person in the room?" Isabel felt the flush rise, but held his gaze. "Because intrigue invites scrutiny, and I've had my fill." He studied her, something sharpening in his expression. "You're not like them." "The others," he nodded toward the clusters of young ladies whispering behind fans. "They wear expectation like perfume. You wear it like armor." "That's poetic." she said warily. He smiled faintly. I mean it kindly, Isabel hesitated. It's hard to trust kind things when they've been so rare. He didn't flinch. That's honest, I respect it. A long moment passed. The music changed. The violins grew bolder. Isabel let her shoulders relax. This was different. James didn't ask what she was reading lately. He didn't mention her gown or comment on the weather. He saw her as a person, not a prize. You said something before, she said suddenly, that I don't chatter like the others. I did. You meant it as a compliment. I did, because I have nothing to say, or because I choose when to speak. He blinked, then gave a slow nod. The latter, clearly. Isabel turned to face him fully. Then I shall choose to speak now. I'm listening. She looked him straight in the eye. I've spent years shrinking to fit rooms that didn't want me. Now I'm being handed gowns and jewels and told to sparkle. It's disorienting. I imagine so. You don't look disoriented. I'm a former soldier, he said dryly. I was trained not to flinch. She smiled, despite herself. And what do you see when you look at me? A woman, he said instantly, who doesn't yet know how remarkable she is. Isabel inhaled sharply. She began, but he stood just then. May I bring you a lemonade? He asked gently. She nodded. As he walked away, Isabel stared at the floor, her heart a drum. No one had ever said something so piercing without expecting her to swoon or simper. He hadn't flattered, he'd observed, and it had shaken something loose inside her. James stood by the refreshment table longer than necessary, letting his breath even. He hadn't intended to speak so plainly, but there was something about her, something real. And he hated how rare that was here. The Duchess appeared at his side, plucking a tart from the tray. You look flushed, she remarked. I am not, he said evenly. She lifted a brow. How is Isabel? Sharp, brave, thoughtful. Oh, she's thinking again. What a danger. James gave her a look. You knew she was extraordinary. I suspected, the Duchess said. But I wanted her to know it. She doesn't yet. She's beginning to. He handed her a glass. Thank you for bringing her to London. The Duchess sipped. Oh, I didn't bring her for you, dear boy. I know. I brought her for herself. He nodded. Still, I'm glad she's here. Back at her seat, Isabel watched him return confident, steady, and somehow not the least bit proud of his own handsomeness. He passed her the lemonade. No lemon seed this time, she laughed softly. That is a rare kindness. I specialize in those. And for the rest of the musicale, they did not move. They sat side by side, two quiet souls in a loud room, speaking little but thinking everything. That night, Isabel wrote a letter to no one in particular, not to be sent, just to be said. He looks at me like I'm real, like I'm not a project or a prize, like I matter, even if I never become beautiful to the world. I don't know what to do with that kind of seeing, but I think I want to be seen. She folded the letter, placed it in the bottom drawer, and went to bed with her heart full of questions and the first flicker of hope. The Duchess's invitation to the Royal Portrait Gallery had been vague. Midday, for culture and quiet. Come with questions, not fans. Isabel arrived precisely at noon, her slippers soft against the marbled floors. The Duchess was nowhere in sight. Only a museum attendant nodded her toward the second-floor salon. She found James Mowbray already there. He stood alone beneath a gilded frame, hands clasped behind his back, studying a large oil painting of a woman mid-laughter. Her head was thrown back, her eyes alive, her gown tumbling off one shoulder in a swirl of peach and gold. He turned at the sound of Isabel's footfall. I expected the Duchess, she said. She sent regrets, he replied. And a note. I'll leave the portraits and the truth to you too. Isabel blinked. She left us alone? In a public gallery? With lunch to follow, he added, gesturing to a pair of covered trays beside a cushioned bench. Apparently, we're meant to converse. She can be terrifyingly effective. That's why I like her, James said. Isabel approached the painting, keeping her gaze on the canvas. She's beautiful. She's alive, James corrected gently. Not just beautiful, there's movement, defiance. She's not smiling for anyone but herself. Isabel tilted her head. You notice that? I try to look beyond the paint. She was quiet a moment. Sometimes I wonder what people see when they look at me. He glanced at her, then back to the painting. Would you like the truth? She nodded, just once. I saw a quiet girl in apricot silk, trying very hard to disappear. I saw kindness in her eyes, tension in her shoulders, and a mind behind it all that hadn't been invited out to play in far too long. She swallowed, he added, more softly. And I wondered what would happen if someone did invite it. Are you trying to flatter me? No, he said. I'm trying to understand you. Isabel stared at the painted woman. My stepmother says I'm forgettable, too pale, too thin, my voice too soft, my thoughts too strange. Then she's threatened by you. She turned to him. You don't even know me. I'm learning, he said, eyes meeting hers. And what I know, I like. Isabel's throat tightened. She wasn't used to compliments that didn't ask something in return. They moved to the bench. James lifted the tray lids to reveal a simple but elegant spread cold chicken, lemon tarts, and fruit soaked in white wine. Duchess knows how to bribe, Isabel said, shamelessly. They ate in companionable silence. Every time her fingers brushed his near the cutlery, the world seemed to hush. May I ask something? She said finally. Of course. You were in the military? 7 years, he said. Rifles and reason. I left after my brother's death, inherited a title I never wanted. I'm sorry, he nodded. So was I, for many reasons. And now? Now I navigate drawing rooms like they're battlefields. Some days I miss the honesty of war. She looked startled. I don't mean the violence, he added quickly. But out there, you knew who your enemies were. Here, it's lace and lies. You think everyone's pretending? Most are, he said. You aren't. I used to pretend that I didn't care, that being overlooked was fine, that I was lucky to be invisible. And now, she looked down, now I want to be seen, but only if the person looking sees me. Not the gown, not the debut, me. James's voice was low. I see you. She met his gaze and saw nothing but sincerity. Why me? She asked, too raw to stop herself. He considered. Because you're quiet, but not timid. Because you listen before you speak. Because you surprise me. I do? You just did. She laughed, then covered her mouth, startled by the sound. James smiled. More of that, please. I'm not sure I know how. You'll remember, he said, rising. In time. He held out his hand. Isabel hesitated. Let's look at the others, he said, not pushing. She slipped her hand into his. They walked the length of the gallery, pausing at paintings of poets and duchesses, soldiers and shepherdesses. He told her absurd stories about each half true, half invented, and she laughed more freely with every step. At the final frame, a tiny portrait tucked beside the exit, she stilled, a woman in a rose-hued gown, her dark hair coiled in an elegant knot. Her expression was unreadable. My mother, she whispered. James turned. You recognize her? The Duchess said this was one of the few official portraits ever made. Mama hated posing. She looks proud. She was, Isabel said. Of other people, never herself. James studied it. Then she'd be proud of you. Isabel blinked back something prickly. You say that like you knew her. He looked down. Briefly. When I was a boy, she visited my parents once with the Duchess. She told me to stop slouching and then gave me a sweet. Isabel smiled. That sounds like her. She was warm, James said, and sharp. She was both. She'd be proud of you, he repeated. This time, she didn't flinch. She simply nodded. As they exited the gallery into the pale sunlight of London, James offered his arm. Walk with me? He asked. Gladly, she said, and meant it. The townhouse drawing room was uncharacteristically alive. The Duchess of Corbridge was reading aloud with the relish of a theatre actress mid-soliloquy. Dearest readers, she intoned, waving a sheet of paper in the air. Lady Thistlewick has returned from her extended European voyage, and not a moment too soon. London has been far too orderly in her absence. Isabel looked up from her embroidery hoop. She's back? Oh yes, and already ruffling feathers, the Duchess said, tapping the gossip sheet with amusement. She's recapped the season thus far, and I'm afraid our household is now under her quill. She cleared her throat dramatically and continued. First, we welcome the match of Lady Lila Montclair now. Lady Eva Marito, her long-lost sweetheart, the dashing Jamie Alden. What's a decade of longing between friends when there are kisses under moonlight? Isabel smiled. She had met Lila at the Evermere's garden party and liked her instantly bright-eyed, warm, full of gentle mischief. It had been difficult to picture her as anyone's wallflower. The Duchess read on. Second, Lady Tabitha Granger's transformation from whisper to waltz has ended in victory, as she now walks arm in arm with Miss Colin Hensley of the soulfully rumpled cravat and reformed heart. Who knew remorse could be so attractive? Isabel bit her lip, trying not to laugh. That's hardly fair. Oh, Thistlewick rarely is, but she isn't wrong. Then came the clincher. The Duchess sat up straighter, eyes gleaming. But the most curious jewel in London's tiara may be Lady Isabel Linden, goddaughter to the redoubtable Duchess of Corbridge herself. Sources whisper of apricot silk, stolen glances, and a certain Viscount Moo, who seems far more besotted than bored. Who is she, really? A shadow with shine? A wallflower in bloom? Or something far rarer? A girl who does not care what we say? Isabel froze. She wrote about me, with enviable flourish, the Duchess said, clearly delighted. You've arrived, my dear. I didn't ask to. No one asks Thistlewick. She simply selects. Isabel folded her embroidery into her lap, her cheeks warm. It feels like being hunted. Good. It means you're a creature worth noticing. The maid appeared at the doorway. Post, Your Grace. The Duchess waved her over. A small stack was placed on the table, mostly invitations and thank-you notes, but on top sat a small wrapped parcel with Isabel's name in looping, unfamiliar script. No return seal. She frowned, unwrapped it, and gasped. Inside was a delicate silver locket. Its oval face bore a tiny engraved ivy, vine-worn, but familiar. Her fingers trembled as she pressed it open. Inside, a miniature portrait. Her mother, again different from the gallery portrait. This one was candid, smiling faintly, a soft lock of hair curling along her temple. She looked younger and full of quiet hope. There was a note folded beneath the velvet lining. Isabel pulled it free with shaking hands. My dearest Isabel, if you are reading this, then I am no longer with you in person, but never doubt I remain with you in truth. You were born to shine, never to shrink. You will not always be seen, but you will always be radiant. I chose the Duchess to guide you, Should I not be there? And I chose her for her fire. But you, my darling, I chose to grow wild and bright in your own time. You are enough. Always, Mama." The words blurred. Isabel sat silently, locket clutched in her palm, eyes brimming. She hadn't heard her mother's voice in years, but now it rang in her head, gentle, strong, steady. "You are enough." The Duchess, who had quietly taken the sheet, said nothing. She reached over, pressed a tissue into Isabel's hand, and placed the note in the small box. "Your mother was a woman of rare grace and steel," she murmured, "and I am not in the habit of making promises I do not keep." "I thought she left nothing behind," Isabel said softly. "She left you," the Duchess said, as if it were the most obvious fact in the world. Isabel closed the locket and placed it over her heart. Later that afternoon, James arrived. He brought no flowers, no gifts, just a well-worn leather book tucked beneath his arm and a soft knock on the doorframe before stepping into the drawing room. "You're early," the Duchess said archly. "I was near." "For 2 hours?" "I was very near." Isabel smiled faintly as he approached. "I brought something for you," he said, offering the book. It was an old volume of poetry, verses for the garden and hearth. Inside the front cover was a pressed marigold, brittle but still golden. "I saw this and thought of you." "Why?" "It's simple," he said, "but resilient. Marigolds survive harsh soil and still bloom." Her fingers brushed the flower. "Do you keep things?" she asked. "Tokens?" "I used to," James said. "Then I lost too many. I stopped. And now? Now I'm learning to gather again." The Duchess cleared her throat loudly from her writing desk. "We're walking," James said quickly. "In the park. Do be back by sunset," the Duchess added. "I have a dinner to scandalize." As they stepped outside, Isabel glanced up at the sky. The clouds had parted, leaving pale blue streaks in their wake. She touched the locket beneath her bodice, heart still full. James looked at her. "You're quiet." "I'm thinking." "Good thoughts?" She nodded. "Hopeful ones." "Then let's keep walking." And they did. Lady Isabel Linden was not used to being the object of attention, and certainly not in the middle of Hyde Park. Yet that afternoon, as she strolled along the gravel path beside Viscount James Mowbray, she felt it. The glances, the flicks of fans and murmurs behind gloved hands. A few gentlemen tipped their hats. One lady nearly walked into a tree. James noticed it too. He leaned slightly toward her, his voice low and dry. "Do you always cause this much disruption, or am I simply lucky to witness it?" "I believe it's your company they're watching," Isabel said lightly, though her cheeks turned pink. The dashing soldier turned Viscount walking beside a nobody. James stopped so abruptly she nearly stumbled. "Don't say that." "Say what?" "Nobody." His jaw flexed. "You must never say that." The breeze tugged at the ribbons on her bonnet. "It's only that, well, they don't know who I am. Lady Thistlewick herself called me a shadow with shine." She also once described Lord Northbridge's voice as sounding like a goose attempting opera. Her barbs are not gospel. Isabel bit her lip to keep from laughing. "You've read her?" "Unfortunately. My sister sends me her sheets with the frequency of scripture." He resumed walking, slower now, and glanced sideways at her. "She thinks I need reminding that scandal is inevitable. She also once implied I'd end up a bachelor lost in a library." "Is that far from the truth?" James considered. "Only that I prefer museums." Isabel smiled. "You're not what I expected." "Good," he replied. "Neither are you." They wandered past a group of children playing with hoops, and Isabel tilted her face to the sunlight. She wore soft rose to day one of the Duchess's favorites with delicate embroidery at the cuffs. The gown was exquisite, but it wasn't the fabric that gave her presence. It was how she held herself now. Shoulders back, eyes clear, changed, yes, but not erased. I've been meaning to ask, James said suddenly, do you always study paintings so intently, at the gallery? He nodded. It's habit. I like to look for what's not being said. I thought you were admiring the dresses. Well, yes, but also, I suppose I was trying to understand how women like that were allowed to take up space, laugh freely, be remembered. He was silent for a beat. Then, your mother was like that. Isabel blinked. You knew her. Not well, he said. But we met a few times. The Duchess brought her to the regiment's New Year gathering once. She wore violet, spoke precisely, listened more than she spoke. That sounds like her. She had a quiet sort of brilliance, like she noticed everything. He hesitated, then looked her full in the face. You have the same eyes. Isabel's throat tightened. People say that, but I mean how you look at the world, like you see past it. That's rare. They walked in silence again for a stretch, neither needing to fill the space. When they reached the marble benches beneath the elms, he stopped and gestured for her to sit. She did. I've never felt understood like that, she said quietly. James settled beside her, long legs stretched before him. Understood? When you said, I remind you of someone who notices more. That's what I've always done, but I was told it made me strange. By who? My stepmother, my cousin, the mirror. She looked down. Sometimes, even myself. You are not strange, he said, his voice firm. You are present. That's rarer than beauty. Though you seem to have acquired both, she laughed, a startled, soft sound. That sounds like flattery. Not at all. I detest flattery. He paused. But I notice things too. Oh, like how you tilt your head slightly when you're thinking, or how you let someone finish a sentence without rushing them. Most people are only waiting to speak. She blinked at him. Why are you telling me this? James looked forward, as if choosing his words carefully. Because I think someone should have said them before. Her fingers twisted together. She wasn't used to this gentle honesty without expectation. I wonder, she said, if I've changed too much. You've changed just enough, he said. Enough to stand taller, but not so much you're someone else. She was quiet for a long moment, watching the sunlight dance through the trees, and then, in an unexpectedly impish tone, she added, although Lady Thistlewick is rather desperate to paint me as a mysterious upstart. He grinned. I'd say, let her. Mysteries are far more interesting than answers. They rose, and James offered his arm. She hesitated only a second before taking it. As they strolled back toward the gates, another woman passed them in a flash of green taffeta. Lady Felice, eyes wide with recognition, and perhaps a touch of disbelief, gave a tight, pinched smile before disappearing behind her chaperone. James saw it. Was that my stepsister, Felice? Ah, the one who says you're too pale for pink. Among other things. He looked down at her rose gown, then smiled faintly. I rather think pink is lucky on you. I think it's rebellion. Then let's be rebels together. She laughed again, and this time it felt effortless. The final ball of the season had arrived, and the Duchess's townhouse shimmered with candlelight, ribbons, and soft strains of a quartet warming up in the salon. Guests flooded in like river water nobility dressed in every jewel tone imaginable. At the top of the stairs, Lady Isabel Linden paused as her name was announced. She wore apricot silk, embroidered with marigold thread and delicate beading. The color brought out the soft honey of her hair and the strength in her posture. She hadn't chosen it to be daring. She had chosen it because she liked it. James was already near the foot of the stairs, waiting with quiet certainty, his dark navy coat immaculate. His eyes found hers immediately and softened. The Duchess, standing regally at the receiving line, watched Isabel descend with a satisfied smile. "I do believe we've outdone ourselves," she murmured to her footman. Lady Thistlewick's gossip sheet for the morning had been tucked inside many reticules, still faintly perfumed with ink. The Cinderella of Cavendish Square, to appear at final ball, apricot or apple of the tun's eye. Isabel didn't know what to make of it. She only knew she was here. That he was here. James bowed as she reached him. "Miss Linden, might I have the first dance?" she curtsied. "Only if you promise not to look so very pleased with yourself when I accept," he chuckled, offering his arm. Too late. They moved onto the floor as the waltz began, and the room blurred around them. Isabel felt her worries melt away as James guided her with a steady hand and light touch. "You've grown used to all of this," he said quietly, "but I hope you haven't forgotten who you were at the beginning." She met his gaze. "How could I? She still lives inside me." "And she always saw more than the rest of us," he murmured. "I think I'm only just catching up." The warmth between them was real, tangible, so much so that Isabel didn't notice Lady Felice until halfway through the second waltz. Her stepsister stood at the edge of the floor in emerald satin, fanning herself listlessly. Her mother, the ever tight-lipped Lady Merivale, hovered beside her, her expression unreadable. Isabel felt a familiar ache in her chest. The years of second helpings, of silence at table, of dresses 2 seasons out of fashion, the backhanded remarks whispered behind doors she was never meant to hear. As the music ended, Felice approached, falsely bright. "Isabel," she said with a simper, "what a transformation. We almost didn't recognize you." Her tone softened with mockery. "You've done so well with your circumstances. I dare say you might even be considered tasteful." James stiffened beside Isabel, but said nothing. Isabel lifted her chin. "Thank you. It's always so reassuring to be noticed by those who once considered me beneath comment." Felice blinked. "Oh, I meant it kindly. You were always such a gentle thing. Not glittering, like the others. But perhaps that's the fashion now, modesty and such." "Indeed," Isabel said, tilting her head. "And I'm pleased to see you've remained exactly as I remember. Constancy is a rare virtue." A few nearby guests coughed into their gloves. James looked vaguely delighted. Felicia's smile faltered, but before she could recover, a familiar figure appeared at Isabel's side. Tabitha Granger, now married to Colin Hensley. She had been sponsored by the Duchess the previous season, met and married Lord Hensley. "Lady Linden," said Lady Hensley warmly, gliding in with understated confidence and a royal blue gown. "I've been meaning to say how radiant you look tonight. You quite outshine the chandeliers." Isabel smiled with genuine affection. "Lady Hensley, how good of you." Tabitha leaned in conspiratorially. "If you're not careful, Lady Thistlewick will name you tonight's triumph, or another diamond, though I fear she's already sick of the term." "I heard she's considering a fresh metaphor," Isabel said. "Perhaps comet." Felice sniffed. "She'll tire of you both by next fortnight." James's expression darkened. "Lady Felice," he said smoothly, "if Lady Thistlewick tires of kindness, intelligence, and grace, I believe she may need a holiday." "I hear Vienna is lovely this time of year," Isabel added, eyes twinkling. Felice took her leave with a tight smile, dragging her mother behind her like a shadow. When they had gone, Tabitha squeezed Isabel's hand gently. "You handled her beautifully." Isabel exhaled slowly. "I didn't know I could. You've always had that in you. Some of us just need time. Or a duchess." She turned with a wink. As Tabitha drifted away, James leaned closer. "I told you pink was lucky. I thought you said it was rebellion. Tonight, it's both." The quartet struck up another tune, and James offered his hand. "Shall we persist?" Isabel laughed, then nodded. "Yes, let's." As they joined the dancers again, she felt no fear, no need to pretend. She was not a phantom in her own story, not a girl to be dismissed or reshaped. She was Isabel Linden, apricot silk, sharp tongue, quiet, strengthened, ready to choose for herself. The final ball of the season shimmered under glittering chandeliers, the grand hall of the Duchess of Corbridge's townhouse alive with whispered speculation and the rustle of silk gowns. London society had gathered in full, eager to witness the last dance of the season and the stories that might unfold with it. Lady Isabel Linden stood near a marble pillar, the soft apricot silk of her gown catching the light, delicate embroidery shimmering like a secret. She breathed in the heady mix of perfume, music, and expectation. The road that had led her here from the shadowed cruelty of her stepmother's house to this night of radiance felt both distant and surreal. She had changed, yes, but more importantly, she had chosen herself. Viscount James Mowbray appeared at her side, his dark eyes steady and warm. He offered his arm with quiet confidence, a gesture heavy with promise. "May I have the honor of this dance?" he asked softly. Isabel smiled, the curve of her lips steady and sure. "I thought you'd never ask." They moved onto the polished floor as the orchestra's first notes rose like a gentle tide. The crowd's attention sharpened. This was no ordinary dance, but the culmination of a season's worth of whispers and hopes. As they found their rhythm, James leaned close, his voice low and earnest. "Isabel, may I ask, why did you say yes?" Her gaze met his, unwavering. "Because I've learned that no one else can decide what I deserve. And because," she hesitated, then added quietly, "because I'm tired of shrinking to fit the expectations of others. This time, I want to stand tall, with you beside me." James's hand tightened gently on her waist, not to restrain, but to hold steady. "Isabel," he murmured, voice thick with feeling. "This, us, it's not just a dance, it's my promise. To see you, to know you, to stand beside you, always." Her breath caught. She searched his eyes, steady and warm, and felt a surge of hope she hadn't dared to admit. "I believe in you, James," she whispered, "and I choose you." He smiled, slow and tender. "Then the choice is ours, not theirs." They moved together, their steps weaving a quiet story of trust and newfound courage. But as their dance continued, a sharp voice pierced the reverie. "Still pretending, are you, Isabel?" Lady Felice's sneer cut through the music, and murmurs like a dagger. The ballroom's edge of curiosity turned to attention. Isabel met her stepsister's gaze calmly, the glow of her confidence undimmed. "Pretending requires an audience, Lady Felice. I'm simply being myself." Before Felice could retort, the Duchess of Corbridge swept forward, regal and commanding. Her hand settled protectively on Isabel's shoulder. "My dear, you owe no one your silence. Speak, live, and love as you please." Polite applause rippled through the room, some hesitant, some sincere. Nearby, Lady Thistlewick, ever the chronicler of society's secrets and scandals, poised her quill above fresh gossip sheets. She leaned toward a companion and whispered with a knowing smile, "Another diamond added to the season's collection. One wonders if there'll be room for any more sparkles." Isabel's cheeks warmed with a mixture of amusement and pride. Across the room, Serena's sharp eyes caught Lady Thistlewick's remark. With a subtle roll of her eyes, she muttered loud enough for a few to hear, "Another diamond? This is getting excessive." James grinned at Isabel and lowered his voice again, a playful edge returning. "Shall we show them how a true dance is done?" Isabel laughed softly, the sound light and free. "Yes, let's." As the orchestra lifted into full swell, they glided across the floor. She was no longer a girl who hid in shadows, but a woman who had chosen her own light, her own love, and her own story. Watching from a nearby table, Serena's sharp eyes narrowed slightly. "Too many glittering girls this season," she murmured with a smirk. If you enjoyed Isabel's journey, be sure to subscribe and follow us for the next tale, From Captain to Quarter. You won't want to miss Serena's story, full of surprises and slow-burning romance.